August 8, 1944. A meat hook, a piece of thin wire, and a general who once commanded thousands of tanks, now standing alone waiting to die. This is the true, filmed execution of Erich Hoepner, and Hitler didn't just want him dead. He wanted it recorded. Erich Hoepner wasn't some random soldier caught in the wrong place. He was a Colonel General, one of the most respected panzer commanders in the entire German army. He led tanks into Poland, into France, into Russia. He was, by every measure, one of Hitler's own men. So how does a man like that end up hanging from a meat hook, filmed for propaganda? That question is exactly where this story begins, and the answer will disturb you. Before we go further, if dark, real history like this hits different for you, hit subscribe now, because what happens in the next few minutes is footage and facts most channels won't even touch. Let's rewind. Hoepner wasn't born a villain or a hero. He was born a soldier in 1886 into a Germany obsessed with military discipline. By World War I, he was already a cavalry officer watching horses charge into machine guns. He survived, but something in him changed. He became obsessed with a new idea: mechanized warfare. Tanks, speed, shock, and that obsession would make him one of Hitler's most valuable generals, before it made him one of his most hated enemies. Here's the twist nobody expects. Hoepner didn't wait until the war was going badly to turn against Hitler. As early as 1938, before World War II had even started, he was already part of a secret plot to arrest, and even kill, Hitler if he invaded Czechoslovakia. That plan collapsed in an instant, the moment world leaders chose to appease Hitler instead of stop him. Hoepner walked away undiscovered, but the seed was already planted. Fast forward to 1941. Hoepner is now commanding the 4th Panzer Group, driving deep into Soviet Russia, getting closer to Moscow than almost any German commander ever would. But winter hits. Supplies vanish. His men are freezing, starving, dying. Hoepner makes a decision that will change his fate forever. He pulls his troops back without Hitler's permission. Hitler doesn't just get angry. He humiliates him, strips him of rank, kicks him out of the army in disgrace in the middle of the war. A man who had given Germany victory after victory, discarded like a traitor for trying to save his own soldiers' lives. And that's the moment something inside Hoepner breaks completely. Because a disgraced general, sitting at home with nothing left to lose, is exactly the kind of man a conspiracy against Hitler needs. What happens next pulls Hoepner into the most dangerous secret in Nazi Germany, a plan involving a briefcase, a bomb, and a date that would define his final months alive. July 20th, 1944. And trust me, what he agreed to do that day is far more shocking than you think. July 20th, 1944. Remember that date because everything Hoepner had been building toward quietly, secretly for years was about to explode, literally. By this point, Hoepner wasn't just bitter about being fired. He was fully inside the resistance. He'd been meeting with other disillusioned officers, men like Friedrich Albrecht, Ludwig Beck, and a colonel with a missing hand and a missing eye named Klaus von Stauffenberg. Yes, that's Stauffenberg, the man who would walk into Hitler's own headquarters carrying a bomb in a briefcase. And Hoepner's role in this plan, it wasn't small. It wasn't symbolic. If the plot succeeded, Hoepner was going to become one of the most powerful men in Germany, overnight commander-in-chief of the entire replacement army on home soil. Think about that. A disgraced general, humiliated and discarded by Hitler, was one bomb blast away from helping run the country that fired him. On the afternoon of July 20th, Stauffenberg planted that briefcase bomb inside the Wolf's Lair, Hitler's heavily guarded headquarters in East Prussia. He lit the fuse, made an excuse to leave the room, and walked out. Then the explosion. For one electric moment, word spread through Berlin that Hitler was dead. Hoepner rushed to the Bendele Block army headquarters, ready to help seize control. This was it. Years of secret meetings, years of risk, all leading to this single afternoon. But here's the gut-punch twist that changed everything. Hitler didn't die. A heavy wooden table leg had partially shielded him from the blast. Burned, deafened, his uniform in shreds but alive. And once Berlin realized that, the entire plot began collapsing within hours. Loyalist forces moved fast. By that same night, the leaders of the coup, Stauffenberg, his aide Werner von Heefen, and 2 others, were dragged into the courtyard of the Bendele Block and shot by firing squad. on the direct order of a general who was covering his own involvement. Hoepner wasn't executed that night, but don't mistake that for mercy. It was something far colder, a private conversation with General Friedrich Fromm, the same man ordering the shootings outside, and that conversation would decide whether Hoepner lived even one more day. He didn't get the quick death of a bullet in a courtyard. Instead, he was arrested that same night and handed over to the Gestapo. What happened next wasn't an interrogation. It was torture, designed not just to punish him, but to make him give up every name he knew. And here's what almost nobody talks about. Hoepner was offered a way out, a pistol, quietly placed within reach. The unspoken Prussian tradition, an officer who had failed and disgraced himself was expected to end it himself privately, with dignity intact. Hoepner refused. He demanded a trial instead. Now you might think that sounds brave, maybe even hopeful, like he believed he could defend himself. But the truth is far darker and far sadder, because the trial waiting for him wasn't justice. It was theater. It was humiliation, built for one purpose only: to break these men completely before killing them, and to film every second of it for Hitler's personal satisfaction. And the judge waiting for Hoepner was a man history remembers as one of the most terrifying figures to ever wear a robe: Roland Freisler, the hanging judge of the People's Court. What Freisler was about to do to Hoepner, in front of cameras rolling for propaganda, would go beyond anything Hoepner had faced on any battlefield. Because on the battlefield, Hoepner had power. In that courtroom, he had none. And in less than 24 hours, the sentence would be read, a sentence chosen not by law, but by Hitler's personal, burning need for revenge. The date was set, August 8, 1944. The location, Plötzensee Prison, Berlin. And what waited for Hoepner, there wasn't just an execution. It was one of the most disturbing scenes ever caught on camera in the history of the Third Reich. And in the final part of this story, we're going inside that room. August 7, 1944. Hoepner is dragged into the People's Court. But before a single word of justice is spoken, they strip him of something most people never think about: dignity. He wasn't given his own clothes. He was forced into ill-fitting, oversized garments, no belt, nothing to hold them up, a deliberate design, so that in front of the cameras a once-proud Colonel General would look pathetic, clutching at his own pants like a broken man. They even took his false teeth. A small detail, a devastating one, because Judge Roland Freisler didn't just want to sentence these men. He wanted the whole world, or at least Hitler, to watch them stripped of everything that made them look like soldiers. And Freisler was merciless. He screamed. He mocked. He interrupted. Survivors of that courtroom described it less as a trial and more as a public execution of a man's character before the actual execution of his body. Even Freisler, a man history remembers as cruelty in a judge's robe, reportedly objected. Not to the torture, not to the verdict already decided before the trial began, but only to the humiliating clothes, as if that one detail crossed some invisible personal line for even him. The verdict was never in doubt. It never is in a courtroom built to convict. Hoepner was sentenced to death. And now we arrive at the moment this video's title promised. The moment history tries to look away from, but we won't. August 8, 1944. Plötzensee Prison, Berlin. A narrow execution room. Steel hooks bolted into the ceiling, the kind normally used to hang meat in a butcher's storeroom. Hitler had given a direct, personal order. No firing squad, no quick death. These men would die slowly, by hanging from thin cord or wire suspended from those hooks, and every second of it would be filmed. Why film it? Because Joseph Goebbels wanted propaganda, a warning. Footage meant to terrify any German soldier who ever thought about turning against the regime. Hoepner was led into that room knowing exactly what was coming. Most of the condemned men had requested a soldier's death, a firing squad, a bullet, something with a shred of military dignity left in it. Hitler refused even that. The camera rolled as the sentence was carried out. Slow, deliberate, designed to be as agonizing and degrading as physically possible, for a man who, only 3 years earlier, had commanded an entire panzer army deep into Russia. The footage that was captured that day became so disturbing that even hardened Nazi officers reportedly refused to watch it when it was later screened. Albert Speer himself admitted he could barely look at the photographs stored afterward. Soldiers at a cadet school walked out in disgust rather than finish watching. Propaganda meant to terrify people into obedience, instead repulsed the very men it was made for. But Hitler's cruelty didn't end with Hoepner's death. Nazi Germany practiced something called Sippenhaft, collective punishment of an entire family for one man's crime. Hoepner's wife, his daughter, his son, a serving army major, his siblings, all arrested. His wife and daughter were sent to Ravensbrück concentration camp, held for weeks in one of its harshest punishment blocks, punished for a plot they never planted a single bomb for. Erich Hoepner was 57 years old when he died, a general who had fought in 2 world wars, who had once believed in the very regime that ultimately butchered him for trying to save it from itself. Here's the haunting question this story leaves behind. Was Hoepner a hero for finally standing against Hitler, or a man who only turned against tyranny once tyranny turned against him? History still argues about that today. Some German records call him controversial even now because of what his own hands did earlier in Russia. That's the uncomfortable truth about this era. Very few people were simply good or simply evil. Most were something far more complicated. And that complexity is exactly why we keep telling these stories. If this kind of real, unfiltered history matters to you, subscribe and stay, because Nazi dark history has many more stories like this one still waiting to be uncovered.